Hi, guys. Today we will be talking about COVID, all things COVID, and how it has had ramifications on our personal life as well as on a broader level. My name is Shreya,
My name's Emily,
and that is
and that
Shruti.
is Ruthie.
Yes, who is currently unavailable but now available. Hello, Shruti. So today we are talking about COVID. My first question for all of us is how has COVID affected our lives? Let's go back to the very beginning of the pandemic. How did you feel? How did you think the government dealt with it? What were your initial feelings?
Well, I guess at the beginning, there's that feeling that you get with all of the things that you see on the news that's happening in other places where you're separated from it. And so, you know how everyone has this feeling when they see something bad happening and they're like, that would never happen to me. But then, like, it did happen to us, and then everyone was basically just the Pikachu meme
Oh
face
God,
for a while. Yeah.
exactly.
Um, so yeah, it was like something that you should have expected, but then you didn't expect. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, when it first broke out, I remember hearing on the news that there were cases in China and then there were cases in the US, and I was like, there's no way it's gonna come to Alberta because, like, why would it come to Alberta? And then it came to Alberta, and I was like, wow, I guess it came to Alberta. And yeah, I guess I was just really surprised by everything because in the beginning I didn't think it was that big of a deal. I thought, like, you know what, media dramatizes everything. I think this is just another thing that they're like blowing out of proportion, but they weren't. I don't think anyone saw like how big this entire pandemic would be and like how big of an effect it would have on everyone. So I guess I was like really blindsided by everything.
Honestly, 100% agree. Like when it first came out, I remember my dad, he was the only one in our family who was really freaked out and he was like, this is going to spread. This is going to spread. And we are like, you're kidding because he's kind of like the worry wart of our family. We're like, no way. And I was thinking about like other diseases like Ebola and I was like like it's definitely very serious, but it never like spread that far. I was like, what's the worst this can do? Like maybe it'll spread to a certain area, it'll become an epidemic, but it went like way beyond our expectations. No one really saw it coming. And definitely, I think because of that, lots of governments, like we just were not prepared for how many people would be hospitalized, how many people would be in serious conditions. So hospitals were not prepared. And governments, I think, because we haven't really had anything serious like this until I think there was some like epidemic for SARS, like COVID-2, like in
I think it was
2007.
SARS, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it was as serious, but definitely we haven't been as prepared as we should have been because this has been happening for like ages and ages, but our we just did not expect how many people would be affected by this.
There was a lot of people afterwards also who um, criticized the government, especially America and Canada, because they didn't completely shut down borders. Right in the beginning, airports were still open. People were still like coming in with no regulation, and so a lot of people felt that if they just had a tighter control on it in the beginning, then it wouldn't have gotten that bad. But I don't know how much of that is fact that they saw something happening and they failed to act on it, or if it's just hindsight bias where we saw that bad consequences happened and then we're saying, oh, you should have done that, when really maybe no one expected that outcome.
Yeah, in response to what you said about hindsight bias, I think it's really easy for us to like right now look back and say we could have done this, we could have done that. Basically, we could have done like all of this better, but like in reality, like would it really have done much if we did close it that fast? Because I do remember that like once we did start taking it seriously, it was still spreading, right? There was like almost it seemed like there was nothing we could do about COVID spreading. So it really makes me wonder, like, is there anything that could have really prevented this pandemic from happening in the first place?
Well, I definitely heard like a lot of people saying that if we had just from the very beginning, all of us had gone into lockdown, we had taken it seriously, then it would not have spread as quickly. But also masking, like if more people were serious about wearing their masks, I've also heard about that. Like it wouldn't have spread to such a degree. But definitely there are like people have different opinions on this issue. Like some people are perfectly fine with staying at home. Other people, they're just they want life to go back to normal, which is perfectly understandable. But as we see like this pandemic going on for 2 years, initially like okay there's some understanding, but as time goes on people get really like frustrated, they want their life to go back to normal, so it increases this polarization between people who are not so ready to like put themselves at risk because this disease is still very much alive and well, whereas there's other people who are like okay it's just a cold, like it's going to become something like say chicken pox, there's going to be vaccines, like we are ready to go back to normal. And then because both sides like we can't really see eye to eye anymore because it's just there's been so much frustration and we've seen like tensions break out in the form of say anti-vax like protests like the trucker convoy as we all know.
Oh yeah.
Oh god.
Like in terms of the polarization, we saw a lot of that in the beginning because there were like fervid anti-maskers, but then there's also people who are fervid like anti-maskers, where um, there's a lot of videos that are online where they would like if someone was not wearing a mask properly or something, they would get clowned for it. Um, and like to a certain extent, a lot of that stemmed from like fear, right? Because um, they want people to respect the safety guidelines. And a lot of the time, people felt that anti-maskers were like basically choosing their own individual freedoms over the basic safety of everyone else, and that there's a sense that they weren't thinking about the long term as much as everyone else, and so there was like a definite polarization between those two groups that want completely different things.
Yeah, and to some extent, I feel like people wearing masks and people not wearing masks, and like the polarization that comes from like not liking what the other group does. I think it both comes down to fear because the anti-maskers, I think they're just scared that because if like enough people wearing masks are wearing masks, then like COVID becomes a reality for them. It becomes like actual instead of just something that they are convinced that people are making up. Of course, I don't speak for every anti-masker, but that's just been my experience with them, like both on the internet and in person. And I feel like for the pro-maskers, the reason that they're so mad and so like disappointed in the anti-maskers is because they're scared that they're going to get COVID, that their actions are going to exacerbate the spread of COVID and it's going to like further cause more people to get sick, more people to die. So both of these come from a place of fear. And I get it. Like I don't want COVID to be a reality either. But like we can't really just pull an ostrich, right, and like bury our head in the sand just because we don't want to get eaten, because in the end it's still behind us, it's still going to eat us, right? Is that what ostriches do? I actually don't know. But
I
like
don't know
for
either.
I
the
don't
sake
know
of
why
this,
they
we're
hide their head in the sand. Is that because someone's chasing them?
What?
maybe I made this up, but for the sake of this, ostriches, when they get scared that they're gonna get eaten, they stick their head in the sand. That's gotta be a saying something or something. I don't know. I'm too tired for this. But like, yeah, even if you stick your head in the sand, whatever is behind you is still behind you, and you're not like doing anything to stop it from eating you. So yeah, as you can probably tell, I am pro mask. Like even during handball practices right now, I'm wearing my mask and I'm wearing it during handball games too, because I just think that like wearing a mask is the least you can do to protect somebody else's safety, and it's also the least you can do to like try and protect your safety as well. It's just a piece of fabric over your face. It's not that hard. If you're like able-bodied like I am, it should be too much of a challenge. Of course, if you have like disabilities, that's an entirely different problem, and I'm not going to shame you for not wearing a mask. But if you can, and you're in like what the peak of that pandemic and you just choose not to, then I really think that there's something inherently wrong with not with you, that's kind of mean, but like there's something wrong with your thought process and the way that you choose to value like your own dignity or your own, I guess, keeping yourself blind from reality over like other people's safety, because there are many people who have died from COVID. I know many people whose like loved ones have died from COVID, and I just think that if you can wear a mask to protect them, then that's really the least you can do.
Throughout this process as well, I think we've seen a lot of undervaluing of the healthcare system. Like there have been many protests like right outside a hospital, even though that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't really do anything because the government is the one making the policies. Healthcare workers can't really change anything. They can just like recommend stuff, but even then, like we've seen plenty in our case, we don't have our government listening to these high healthcare, like in places like high positions of healthcare, they're not really listening to them. So I don't think it's the right place for them to protest. But also like these healthcare workers are like working day in day out, like they're seeing people dying from COVID, right? I don't think we're like appreciating that enough. Like honestly, they're probably some of the people who are going through like the brunt of this pandemic, and it seems like it's being undervalued. People are not really appreciating them as much as they should.
I agree with that, and I feel like a lot of people who were part of like anti-mask and anti-vax protests, um, like I feel like a big part of it was also that they're not always getting um, the same information or reliable information in terms of COVID and how it works, and so like I, there were parts of the pandemic where it was difficult to get information that told you that this is how COVID works, and masks prevent it because of this, and the vaccine prevents it because of this. And so there was also a lot of false information um, that was making people believe weird conspiracy theories, like the government made COVID um, in order to control you and things like that. But yeah, that I feel like the misinformation and uncertainty in terms of the science part of COVID is also part of what made people reluctant to completely change their lives for something that they didn't really understand.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Especially at the beginning of the pandemic, I think there were many infographics on Instagram that were basically spread around that, like, no, you shouldn't wear masks for some reason. I think it was under the premise of like leaving them for healthcare workers, which I get, but still, right now we do know better, right? Right now we know that we should definitely be wearing masks. Um, yeah, when we're in public gatherings and when we're like around many people. But I feel like because of how new COVID is or it was really difficult to get reliable information because it was constantly changing. People were making new discoveries like pretty much every other day, and it was like really difficult to keep up if you weren't like devoting every single second of every single day to keeping up and tracking news based on COVID. So yeah, that's pretty difficult. And right now, though, I think we've generally come to the consensus that yes, wearing masks is good, getting vaccinated is good. If you're sick, staying home is also good. But those were a bit more murky at the beginning of the pandemic, and I think that also caused a lot of uncertainty and fear going into it.
I completely agree with that. Um, as speaking for uncertainty, like in a school setting, this is kind of jumping onto another topic, but in school settings, like we've definitely seen a lot of changes with how COVID has like changed learning. Like we went online at the very beginning of the pandemic. I remember thinking at the beginning, I was like, oh yes, finally a break because I was so
Extended
tired. I
spring
was like,
break.
extended spring break. And then my dad was like, no, it's for the whole year. I was like, not that bad. Like at that time, I was actually like, that sounds really good. But then I remember, like, honestly, my motivation went down. Like, it went down because I realized if there is no one keeping me accountable, I will not keep myself accountable. So, if anything, this really taught me I need to find something to like motivate myself during like these pandemic times. Like you're just so isolated. You're really in your room as you're studying during these COVID times. Like your parents are like usually out of the house. So it's hard to keep yourself motivated. Online learning is personally for me not the best. We've had many instances of that. And then Also throughout the year, like in our grade 11 year, it was definitely very different, even though there were definitely we had times we were at school, but most of it was like we were separate, like we were doing a lot of things online. We didn't have as many group activities. So that was interesting to see. I wonder how that will shape our like um teaching and learning dynamic in the coming years. Like maybe we'll have more online stuff. Let's see.
Yeah, I know that COVID definitely affected like our year specifically because we spent most of our high school with having to deal with COVID. Like, um, I know teachers have told us things like you might have to do more catching up in university because like we're dealing with the years before us who got normal environments in learning, and then the ones that are coming after us with COVID like dying down hopefully, um, that are returning to this new normal. And so we were like that in between group that kind of got stuck with all the changes that sort of messed up our learning.
Yeah, I definitely see the impacts of COVID on learning, especially on online school. We're in grade 12 now, and this is actually the first full year of high school that we've done in person, which is like, wow, that's kind of crazy to think about. Um, I guess if you count the extended winter break, we had a 3 week winter break because there was like a pretty big increase in Omicron cases. Um, but that was pretty minor, so I'm not going to think about that. And I'm just going to say that we got 1 full year of high school. But yeah, our grade 10 year, we got what? March, April, May, June, all online because of COVID. Our grade 11 year, I'm pretty sure more than half of it was online because, like, combining the province wide lockdowns and stay at home learning mandates and stuff. Also, the individual class shutdowns because of like certain people who got COVID in our classes. That's more than half the school year that we had to spend online. And I can tell you that for sure it is definitely more difficult to motivate yourself online, partly because it doesn't even feel like a real classroom setting, right? Because you roll out of bed, you hop on the Google Meet, um, your math teacher is like doing equations or whatever, and you're like, what if I just went on YouTube? What if I just needed the Google Meet tab and watched YouTube for the full 3 hours and 30 minutes of class? Because we're having really long classes now, apparently.
Mhm.
And sometimes you would do that, for legal reasons. This is a joke. I never went on YouTube. I definitely paid attention to my
Sure.
class. But yeah, there were definitely some people, and it was definitely very tempting to do this. So that definitely had an impact on learning. That's like not the teacher's fault. That's not anyone's fault but your own, basically, because you decided to go on YouTube. But yeah, it definitely made like not paying attention in class a lot easier, and it definitely made it like more difficult to motivate yourself to actually pay attention and absorb that information. And I think that really reflects on, I guess, how we're doing this year, because I, from like whom I'm talking to and who I know, there are definitely people who are struggling a bit more this year than they have in like grade 10, for example. Maybe that's like just the course material getting harder, but I also think it's like an impact of not really learning as well online because of like how many shutdowns we had throughout COVID.
Yeah, for sure. With COVID, like there have been like it's not just academics, but it's also been like friendships. Like I remember in grade 10, I was having many like budding friendships with people, and then with COVID in grade 11, and with full IB, like I really had a set cohort of people I always mixed with because like remember at the beginning of the year you had like cohorts and stuff. So I really didn't interact with anyone outside of my cohort, which was basically the full IB kids. So I all
Oh,
the friendships I had, it was like I remember like talking to them, and then in grade 11, I didn't talk to them at all. And then now, only in grade 12, when it's like kind of a little bit more normal, that I'm actually starting to talk more to more of these people and like rekindling these friendships. So it's also had an effect on friendships as well. Um, Definitely, when you're online learning, like it's really hard to stay focused because there's something to be said with face to face connections because you can really like it feels like it feels more real. You can be more creative. Like it's just so much easier when you're online. I had many instances like I wouldn't even be going on YouTube or anything. I would just disconnect. Like my brain would be somewhere else completely, especially after like hours and hours of learning. Like I just could not stay there mentally.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like all of us just had trouble with concentration and with motivation during those couple of years when we were dealing with online learning, with pandemic learning. And it also affected like overall clubs and activities and the things that in grade 10 we were really excited to do. um, it became difficult to do them, and then so it just became hard to maintain those interests because I know there were like a lot of clubs that I was excited for, but then in grade 11 they had online meetings, right? And so it's a lot harder to get like club activities and a nice atmosphere when you're on a screen again and people don't really want to come back late in the afternoon just for that. Um, and even with sports were completely off in the last year in grade 11. And so like that cut off a couple of things that I really enjoyed doing. So I felt like I didn't have the same opportunities or outlets that I could have gotten if there was no pandemic, which is sort of sad.
Yeah, I will say online club meetings, they are, yeah, they really suck. This year, I think we had to go online for club meetings for a while too. And I had to run a few online club meetings, and that was actually really hard because it feels like you're just talking to a blank screen and nobody is responding to you. So it's like you're talking to yourself, but you also don't know why you're talking to yourself. And yeah, so it was just really difficult to run them. I'm sure it was really difficult to be engaged in them as well. And I feel like that definitely did affect like the productivity and the amount of stuff we were able to get accomplished. Yeah, so that generally wasn't fun. In response to your point about athletics, I definitely feel you. In grade 10, right, I was basically never not playing a sport because in the beginning of the year I was playing volleyball, and when volleyball ended there was basketball and then there was handball, but our season got cut off before trials even ended. So yeah, and in grade 11 we basically had no sports at all. So it was kind of like weird, to end school at a normal time because I was used to like just walking over to the gym. We don't have a gym in our school, so we have to walk into another school's gym. That is so funny. But like, yeah, I was just used to like walking over to the gym to do practice and stuff, and then getting home really, really late and cramming my homework then. But in grade 11, I got home at a normal time. I got home like before it got dark, and it was really, really surprising to me for the first few weeks because I was like, oh wow, this is what it feels like to be like a non-sports doer student. I just threw a bunch of words together. Oh my gosh. But yeah, and I feel like that really having no sports, right? It was really hard on me because I'm just really used to being active and like just doing stuff after school. And COVID kind of took away the outlet I had to like enjoy other activities that aren't homework and studying. And I feel like, yeah, it was just not very fun. I'm really glad that we got sports back this season. We're playing handball right now, so that's very fun. But yeah, I'm just super glad I got to like at least finish out my sports seasons at our school.
That is awesome to hear. I completely feel you about the whole like just not being able to do as much as you're supposed to do in your high school experience, like fully enjoying it. There's a lot of negatives for sure. Um, because we've been talking about so many negatives, I want to try focus on maybe some positives because they definitely do exist. I don't know if it exists for school. I'm sure it does exist for the school
Probably.
environment. Like, it probably does. I guess I've become more health conscious. I was thinking like positives on like a more like a business level, I've been reading a bunch of stuff that because businesses can do more stuff online, they haven't had to like pay as much for like renting an office space or like all the other resources that they would have had to if it was in person. So you can still get a lot done online and you wouldn't have to pay as much. Like it's better for the businesses. Actually, on another positive note, there's been a lot of innovation as well, like because businesses have really had to think outside of the box to keep themselves running. So I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot of like of these innovative tactics continuing into the future, because now that we know that like online stuff is very successful, I'm sure like there's customers who are not like gonna move on from online, like Amazon, Sheen, all this stuff. These things are really thriving and there are businesses learning from that. On another note, though, there are still a lot of jobs that you can't run them online, like restaurants. You have like people who
Mm-hmm.
are in offices, like they're cleaning, stuff like that. These jobs, like they, lots of people have been laid off. Like I was talking to someone who, like I volunteer at Canadian Blood Services. There were a lot of people who would come to me and tell me how they have been laid off in the pandemic because they had jobs that really were in person. You can't move them online. They don't work like that. So right now they're relying on employment insurance. So although there are definitely people who are thriving because of online working, like it still works for them and they can even do it better because they're at home. There are still people who are suffering from it. So it's really exacerbated. I think that's the word. The disparity.
Exasperating.
Yeah, exasperated. I guess exasperated the disparities. Income
I don't think I said that
or
word right.
exacerbated.
Anyway,
Some, yeah, you know what we're saying. That's what
Words
that
are
means.
hard.
What do you
yeah,
think?
I
Okay.
agree. Um, I'm not sure what else to say on that topic. I don't really know much about it. Um, okay, well, we could talk about so now that we're like on the tail end, hopefully the tail end of the pandemic, we have sort of mask mandates and vaccine passports going away. People can gather, um, and so it's like we're sort of returning to normal. What are your thoughts about that?
To some extent, I feel like we're rushing it a bit because it's really funny because in January we had to take a week off of school. We got an extended winter break because of how bad Omicron was getting. And then, like, what, 1 month later, we're like, no more masks, no more staying at home if you're sick, no more COVID tests. And that was like, wow, that kind of gave me whiplash because, like, are you sure? Like, we just had to stay home for an entire week and not go to school because Omicron was getting pretty bad, and you also canceled January diploma exams.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like
It's funny because they
Kenny
also,
and
oh sorry, they also gave us masks and then they just
Yeah,
cancel everything. I was like, wait a minute, what are you doing? Why did you give us all
and
these masks then if we can't wear them? I mean, we
the
still
COVID
can, but
tests.
like,
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
helped with a bunch of COVID
okay,
tests at home because first of all, you don't even have to test for COVID anymore, and also I haven't gotten sick. But like, I just don't need to use them anymore, right? So what was the point of that? But yeah, it feels like the government is just trying to pretend that COVID never existed because, but I think we're going to be writing our June diploma soon. At least that's the plan. I haven't heard anything otherwise, so I'm just assuming we're writing them. No more mask mandates indoors. Concerts are still a go, like large concerts with like many people, and yeah, basically, COVID doesn't exist anymore is the message we're getting, except in January, which was honestly not that long ago. We had to stay home an extra week because Omicron was getting pretty bad. And like right now, you never hear any news reports on the amount of Omicron
mm-hmm.
cases because we've pretty much stopped tracking. So we'll really never know if it's getting bad or if it's getting better because we're just trying to forget that COVID existed in the first place. And I'm not really sure if that's like the best way to go about this.
I feel like a lot of people also it's like they're sort of likening COVID to the flu, because at one point the flu was like a really big thing and it was killing a lot of people. But then over time it just became endemic, and it's like something that happens every year. And you're like, oh, it's flu season, and people are still dying from it. And but we're sort of just like treating it like a normal part of life. And so I feel like that's the direction that like they're trying to push it. The only thing is I don't know yet if we're at that stage where COVID is um becoming endemic, because like usually at that point a lot of people are like vaccinated, right? And they're building immunity to that like virus. So then it's becoming less of like an, oh my god, everyone's dying around me. It's more of a like, oh, remember to get your flu vaccine, it's flu season, remember to wash your hands, you know? So I'm not sure what the time period it is for us to get to a point where COVID becomes just like either it's completely gone or it's just like a regular thing that we can work
I think you mentioned something about herd immunity, right? Did I just completely make that up in my head?
around. Not exactly herd immunity, but yeah, basically
Okay.
something along those lines.
Yeah, I remember I was doing my math I on this, right? So like certain
Mhm.
a number of people are like vaccinated, then it should be okay. But we're not at that point yet, like not even close. So um, at least not in Canada. I don't know about other places. Like other places, I've heard. I think actually, I'm not gonna give false info, but there are some like
There
European
are some
places.
places that are good because they actually like their lockdowns were in the very beginning and they locked down very very strictly.
Mm.
So it's like they didn't get any of like the original cases sort of, so they didn't have to deal with like that domino effect as hard as maybe some place like the US or Canada, right?
Yeah, for sure. On that note, since we're going on a like a more global kind of more global scale, how has COVID like impacted world politics and economic trade? Do we want to start
That
with
is
one? Oh, okay,
a
Emily,
tough
go ahead.
question.
Yeah, it's a lot. Choose
Yeah,
one.
I could basically just say it's negatively affected Alberta's economy because every time I turn on the radio, I hear Jason Kenney being like, "We need to
Oh
get our
god.
economy back in order. We need to like stop locking down." And I'm like, "Cool, I don't
Cool.
care." But yeah, oil. I love oil. I'm from Alberta.
Interesting. Me too. In terms of the economy, at least, I think this pandemic has really shown us how like interconnected we are. Like we already know globalization is a thing, but it has shown like there are definite downsides to being so connected in times of crises, because you really need to be able to be self-reliant to an extent that you can at least provide for the basic needs of your citizens and keep your economy running so that people still have jobs, right? So we've definitely, I think in the coming years, especially with this whole Russian Ukraine crisis, we'll be seeing like countries becoming much more self-reliant on things and pulling away from being as interconnected, so that in future crises hopefully we won't be as affected economically. In terms of politically, I'm not actually too sure. I have to think about that one.
I'm not sure if anyone was really politically affected unless it was in terms of, you know how sometimes the way that a country's economies are working with each other can affect how their politics are with each other. So unless it was sort of like that sort of thing, I'm not sure if COVID ever directly influenced like international politics, but I don't know anything. So.
Going back to Shreya's point about like how interconnected we are, I think a really good example of this was the beginning of the pandemic, where we had a bunch of food shortages because like experts just were coming in, and there was this entire thing about hoarding toilet paper, so you could like, oh my god, this is creepy, but yeah, you know the rest. yeah. But yeah, especially about food, we all need food to survive. It's pretty important to rely on like domestic um production of food because in the next crises, like you don't want your people to starve if you can't get the extra food on time. And I think a really big impact on this was that we're going to be trying to like buy more locally grown and we're going to like try and boost our locally grown economy in terms of the food because we saw how dependent we are on food exports and in case of another crisis like we don't want the same thing to happen. We don't want like there to be another food shortage because we can't get our exports in.
Any other comments on global ramifications? Um, Socially. Oh yeah, I guess we could also talk about like in terms of behavior, how COVID might have impacts in the long term. Like I've been like when I turn on the news, there's been a lot of talk about like how in the future maybe we won't be like shaking hands. Like we might have like a different form of handshaking. Like if you choose to like not like shake like yeah exactly like the elbow bump like stuff like that and then like mass becoming more acceptable in public because there's been a lot of studies that show that not only is it like COVID, but also like other flu. Like the flu season has been like for the last 2 years, it's been like really on the down low. So there have definitely been changes there. I think hopefully this is like going to be make mass more acceptable and certain behaviors. It'll be interesting to see like how this changes like people's behaviors in society, especially during flu
Yeah.
season.
In response to what you said about masks, they definitely work because every winter, like every what November to March before COVID, I would just get the flu like clockwork. Like 1 week,
Me
two
too.
weeks, I would just be down. I would You could not contact me. I would be dead to everybody because I got the flu and like that sucks. It's horrible. But after COVID, we started wearing masks. We started sanitizing our hands, and I stopped like touching gross things like the stair walls, like the stair handles. Right, those are pretty gross. Many germs on there, and I stopped like I guess touching my face so much too as well. So I didn't get sick. I like for the last 2 years, I haven't gotten sick. I haven't gotten the flu in cases that it wasn't transmitted to me by a close family member. My brother got sick like what last month. It was the flu, and our entire family got sick, and we had to stay home. But I never got sick in any other case. Like I didn't just randomly get sick because I touched something gross. So yeah, masks definitely work, and I feel like we should definitely still wear them because I know I will because I don't like getting sick. But yeah, I feel like we should consider like just making wearing masks a norm because even if it's not COVID, it's the flu, and it still sucks if you get it. So yeah, my petition to wear masks forever.
Very cool. Okay.
That
To
was such a tangent. I'm sorry.
no, it was very cool. It's an interesting insight. I'll have to consider like wearing masks. Like actually, sometimes I just wear masks because I don't want people to see my face, so that I can laugh at them without them seeing me. I'm sorry to all my teachers. I do this too. Okay, to end off, do we want to talk about like a few things we've learned from the pandemic that we will carry on with us. I mean, for me, I guess one thing I've learned is that from all the polarization we've seen from COVID, I've definitely learned that there's many dimensions to a story, and it's not fair to necessarily point fingers and say that this side is wrong. I think it's it's definitely really important to listen, even though you don't always understand where they're coming from. If you choose not to listen, then there's a danger of just causing more polarity and alienating other people in your community.
Yeah, I agree. In terms of what I took away, I guess just the importance of um, like living a life where you're reaching out to other people and you're not always isolated because it works for some people and it doesn't work for others. Like I know for me, I'm pretty introverted, so I was totally fine not really talking to people and like reaching out once in a while. But for other people, it's not. And I think everyone needs um, outlets outside of themselves in terms of extracurriculars or like hanging out with friends. And so just making sure that you're maintaining those relationships and things that are important to you, that's sort of my takeaway.
Yep, I definitely agree with both of your points, but on a less serious note, I learned that online gym class is such a bad idea. Um,
Oh god.
Another tangent here, but in grade 10, I had to take gym online. So what we would do is we would hop on a Google Meet, we would tell our gym teacher about how our day went, and it usually went like, "Oh, my day's been going well. How's yours?" And for like the rest of the time, she would give us homework, gym homework. She would show us like this dance that we would have to do. We would have to like copy it, except I can't dance. So I was just like, "Listen, I can't dance." But it was so bad. It was so bad because I had gym in the afternoon too. So I could have just gone outside and rode my bike and actually done physical activity. But instead, I was inside on a really nice day on a Google Meet talking about how my day went, listening to like 25 other people talk about how their day went, and listening to my gym teacher assign homework for gym class. It was so bad. I would never do it again. Yeah, I'm ending my tangent there. But like, yeah, I definitely also learned how important like friendships are and how important it is to like actually put into work and to maintain them. Because in quarantine, it was like really, really easy to just ignore people for days on end. Like I think for the first 2 months, I didn't talk to anyone outside of my family. It was just like radio silent. I could have died and nobody would have known. That was a bit horrible, but still. But like I didn't talk to anyone. And after the first month, I was like, oh wait, I kind of miss my friends. So when we decided to
Kinda. Okay. Keep going.
sorry, let me rephrase. I really miss my friends. But
All
yeah,
right. All right. Sure. All right.
so after that,
On that strangely funny note, I guess to recap, this podcast has really been about COVID. Oh my god, I can't even. That's so funny. It's been about COVID, how it's affected various aspects of our daily lives, as well as its ramifications. I've done it. Ramifications on a broader level. Don't laugh at me. So, to recap, definitely COVID has come with many difficulties and oh no, exasperated polarization. I've chosen big words. But also, it's also shown us that there are still positive sides and the strength of human will and the strength of human condition to still thrive and find innovative ways to keep going despite all these difficulties. And it's also shown the importance of connection during these isolating times. So hopefully, this podcast has helped you gain some insight and think a bit deeper. We hope to see you guys next time on our next podcast, whatever that may be. Bye. See you guys soon.